A raise. You should be grateful we even keep you. Gerald Bennett laughed, his voice bouncing off the conference room walls. I sat perfectly still in my chair, the quarterly performance review folder open before me. 9 years of exceptional evaluations. 9 years without a single pay increase. Julian, your request is Eleanor Sinclair. The chief financial officer tilted her head with exaggerated sympathy. Ambitious considering market conditions. The leadership team exchanged knowing glances around the table. 8 people who collectively made decisions about my worthwhile. Knowing nothing about what I actually did for them, I developed the calibration method that increased our precision by 45%, I said, keeping my voice steady. Production time was cut by 60%. The Westlake contract alone, which we secured through aggressive negotiation tactics, interrupted Bradley Owens, vice president of sales, though we both knew it was my technical specifications that won that deal. I have trained 22 junior technicians since I started. I have personally troubleshot critical issues for our top clients. The European expansion would have collapsed if I had not. Team effort, Gerald cut in, drumming his fingers on the polished surface. Everyone pulls their weight here, Julian. My salary has not changed since I was hired. I am only asking to align with current industry standards. Gerald leaned back, exchanging amused glances with the others. Industry standards are for average contributors. If you want extraordinary compensation, show us extraordinary results. My chest tightened. The calibration breakthrough I had pioneered had generated millions. Last quarter report, which I was not supposed to have seen, attributed a 35% profit increase directly to proprietary technical innovations. The numbers speak for themselves, I said, sliding the market research across the table. Engineers with my qualifications and output are compensated at least 40% higher. Gerald did not even glance at my carefully prepared documents. He simply pushed them back. A raise? You should be grateful we even keep you. The vice president laughed during my review. The whole leadership team nodded in agreement. I stood up, placed an envelope on the table, and said, "Thank you for your time." 4 days later, when they opened it and saw where I was going, their panic calls began flooding my phone. My name is Julian Vance. And until 3 weeks ago, I was the lead calibration engineer at Apex Industrial Dynamics. Not that you would know it from my title, which remained Technical Specialist 2, despite my responsibilities expanding year after year. I grew up in Oregon, taking apart every device in our house, much to my parents' dismay. By 12, I could reassemble a vacuum cleaner with improved suction. At 16, I modified my high school physics equipment to achieve measurements their budget could not afford. My engineering professors in college called me Precision Julian, a nickname that followed me into my professional life. When I joined Apex, I was grateful for the opportunity. The company manufactured industrial equipment for sectors ranging from aerospace to medical technology. My starting salary seemed reasonable for a recent graduate, and the promise of growth kept me motivated through long hours and demanding projects. The calibration breakthrough came during my second year. For months, I had noticed inconsistencies in our testing apparatus, tiny variations that others dismissed as acceptable margin. But in precision manufacturing, those margins represented the difference between excellence and adequacy. I spent weekends experimenting with alternative methods using my own equipment, purchased piece by piece from my modest salary. The solution came to me at 3 in the morning, a hybrid approach that integrated digital measurements with mechanical fine-tuning in a sequence nobody had tried before. When I demonstrated my method to the engineering team, the results were immediate. Precision improved dramatically, increasing by 45% while cutting calibration time from 8 hours to 3 hours and 12 minutes. The production floor implemented my technique within a week, and suddenly our products outperformed every competitor in accuracy tests. Orders increased. Quality complaints disappeared. Client retention hit 100% for the first time in company history. I waited for recognition, a promotion, a bonus, even just acknowledgement in the company newsletter. Instead, in the quarterly meeting, my innovation was presented as our new proprietary method with no mention of my name. Gerald took questions from impressed board members while I sat silently in the back row. This is how business works, my colleague Lawrence Foley told me afterward. Individual recognition is not how you advance here. Be patient. So, I was patient. I trained new hires on my calibration method. I documented every step so production would not suffer during my rare sick days. I answered calls from clients at midnight when their equipment needed emergency adjustments. The European expansion came in my 6th year. Regulatory standards differed significantly from American requirements, and the first shipment of machines failed inspections spectacularly. The expansion team was in crisis, with millions in equipment sitting in warehouses unusable. "Julian, we need solutions, not explanations," Gerald said during the emergency meeting. "Either fix this or we will find someone who can." I canceled plans for the next 8 weekends. My relationship with Sylvia Finch ended when I missed her brother Oliver Finch's wedding. I redesigned critical components, revised testing protocols, and created new calibration standards specifically for European requirements. By the 10th week, our equipment passed inspection, with scores exceeding local manufacturers. The company celebrated the successful expansion with a party I could not attend. I was on a video call with overseas technicians, walking them through implementation. Each year, my performance reviews praised my dedication and technical expertise. Each year, my compensation remained unchanged. When I raised the issue, I was told the company was restructuring, or consolidating resources, or emphasizing team achievements over individual contributions. I watched newer employees, usually men with half my experience, negotiate starting salaries higher than what I was making after 8 years. That is just how negotiation works. Human resources explained when I inquired, "Your performance is valued, but we cannot disrupt internal equity by adjusting established employees." So, I stopped asking and started applying elsewhere. The offers came quickly. My reputation in the industry had spread, despite the company's effort to brand my innovations as their collective achievement. I declined 3 positions out of misplaced loyalty before an unexpected email arrived in my personal inbox. "Your calibration method has revolutionized equipment precision standards," wrote Catherine Thorne, director of the National Certification Alliance. "We are creating a new position, Chief Innovation Officer, to modernize certification protocols across the industry. Based on your contributions to the field, we would like to discuss your interest." The National Certification Alliance sets the standards that every manufacturer in our sector must meet. Their certification is the difference between market access and bankruptcy. Their offer included compensation that made my current salary look like a clerical error, plus authority to shape industry practices. I met with Catherine for dinner, intending only to gather information. 3 hours later, surrounded by empty plates and pages of notes, I realized I had found my path forward. "I need 3 weeks to properly transition my current projects," I told Catherine. "Take the time you need," she replied. "We have waited years for someone with your vision. A few more weeks will not matter." I decided to give Apex one final chance. I prepared documentation showing my contributions, market salary data, and a modest request that would still leave me underpaid but would acknowledge my value. I scheduled my annual review early, arriving with hope that rationality might prevail. Instead, I got laughter and dismissal. As I walked back to my workstation, a strange calm settled over me. 9 years of doubt about my worth dissolved in an instant. Their reaction was not a negotiation tactic. It was a revelation of how they truly saw me, disposable despite being irreplaceable. I sent a brief email accepting Catherine's offer before starting my afternoon tasks. That evening, I drafted my resignation letter. 2 paragraphs, professional and concise. I simply stated that I would be departing in 3 weeks to pursue another opportunity and would ensure all my projects were properly transitioned. I slipped the letter into an envelope. My phone lit up with a text from Lawrence Foley. "How did the review go?" I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying exactly as expected. The next morning, I arrived at work as usual. I prepared my workstation and began addressing urgent client requests. At precisely 9:30, I walked to the conference room where the leadership team was having their daily briefing. I knocked once and entered. 8 pairs of eyes turned to me with mild surprise. "Julian, we are in the middle of something," Gerald Bennett said, annoyed at the interruption. I approached the table silently and placed the envelope in the center. "Thank you for your time," I said, and walked out, closing the door behind me. The envelope remained unopened for 4 days. I continued working, documenting processes and training colleagues. No one mentioned my unusual appearance at the leadership meeting. On the fourth day, while I was calibrating equipment for our newest client, my phone began vibrating continuously. 8 missed calls from Human Resources, 5 from Gerald, 3 from Eleanor Sinclair. I turned it off and finished my calibration. When I returned to my desk, Brenda Fletcher from Human Resources was waiting. "Julian," she lowered her voice. "Gerald opened your letter. He is concerned. Can we talk privately?" I followed her to a small conference room where Gerald and Eleanor were already seated. Gerald pushed my resignation letter across the table. "What is this?" he asked, as though the clearly stated resignation was written in hieroglyphics. "My 3 weeks' notice," I replied. "I have accepted another position." "Where?" Eleanor demanded. "I would prefer not to discuss that until I begin my new role." Gerald leaned forward, his demeanor transformed from yesterday's mockery to today's desperation. "Julian, we may have been hasty during your review. Let's revisit your compensation request." "The leadership team was having a difficult day," Brenda added. "We value your contributions tremendously." "I appreciate that," I said, "but I have already accepted another offer." "Whatever they are paying, we will match it," Eleanor said. I thought about 9 years of denied requests, of watching less qualified colleagues advance, of weekend work and midnight troubleshooting, of innovations attributed to the company rather than to me. "This is not about money," I said, though partly it was. "It is about finding the right opportunity for my career growth." "We can create a new position," Gerald offered. "Senior technical specialist with a team reporting to you." "Thank you, but my decision is final." They continued with escalating offers, as though negotiating with a hostage-taker. By the time I left that room, they had promised a 70% raise, a director title, and a seat on the innovation committee. I declined each offer with increasing certainty. The next 3 weeks were surreal. Colleagues who had barely acknowledged me for years suddenly wanted lunch. Executives who could not remember my name stopped by my workstation with technical questions. I documented everything meticulously. Calibration procedures, troubleshooting protocols, client-specific modifications. I created training materials for processes I had previously maintained alone. I transferred knowledge accumulated over 9 years into organized files accessible to anyone who might need them. On my final day, I handed over my projects to 3 different engineers, each taking a portion of my responsibilities. My desk took less than 10 minutes to clear. Gerald appeared as I was signing final paperwork. "This is a mistake, Julian," he said. "You are throwing away 9 years of building your career here." I stopped at the security desk and handed over my badge. Those 9 years provided valuable experience. "I am grateful for that. At least tell us where you are going," he pressed as we reached the lobby. "We should stay in touch." I considered various responses before settling on simple truth. The National Certification Alliance. Today was my last day here, but I do not start there for 4 weeks. I am taking some time off. His face went pale. "In what capacity?" "Chief Innovation Officer." Gerald's expression collapsed into panic. He knew, as everyone in our industry knew, that the Alliance standards determined which products reached market and which failed. His voice dropped to a whisper. "We should talk about this." "We have had 9 years to talk," I replied. "Goodbye, Gerald." I walked through the glass doors into bright spring sunshine, the weight of unappreciated years falling away with each step toward my car. Those 4 weeks between jobs were the first real break I had taken since college. I visited my parents at their home in Oregon, spending quality time with my mother, who was 56, and my father, who was 58. We hiked trails in the Cascade Range that I had always been too busy to explore, and for the first time in 9 years, I slept soundly without setting an alarm for dawn. My parents noticed the change in me immediately. They had watched me burn myself out for a company that barely acknowledged my existence. Now, they saw a man who had reclaimed his peace. During those quiet weeks, I declined 20 calls from various Apex Industrial Dynamics numbers and deleted their desperate voicemails unheard. I was done being their unpaid firefighter. On my first day at the National Certification Alliance, Catherine Thorne personally showed me to my office. It was a spacious, quiet room with a real door and actual windows overlooking the city skyline, a stark contrast to the cramped, windowless shared workstation I had occupied for nearly a decade at Apex. The certification standards have not been substantially updated in nearly 10 years, Catherine explained, pouring us both coffee. Technology has evolved rapidly, but our compliance requirements have remained stagnant. Your first major project is to modernize our entire approach, particularly in precision measurement and calibration protocols. I spent my first month learning the organizational structure, reviewing current standards, and identifying outdated requirements. By the 6th week, I drafted preliminary revisions that would raise industry standards to reflect current technological capabilities. These are significant changes, noted Roland Mercer, the technical review director, during our planning meeting. Some manufacturers will struggle to comply. Any manufacturer using current industry best practices will meet these standards easily, I replied. The changes primarily affect those who are using outdated calibration methods or taking shortcuts like ignoring calibration drift over time to save operational costs. Exactly like that, I said, thinking of how Apex routinely extended calibration intervals beyond recommended limits to save money, a practice I had repeatedly flagged as dangerous in my reports. The standards revision process took 3 months of meticulous work, peer review, and industry consultation. Throughout, I maintained strict professional ethics, never targeting specific manufacturers or creating requirements that only benefited certain companies. The new standards simply reflected what was truly possible with modern technology, precision levels I had personally achieved years earlier. When the updated standards were officially published, my phone rang within hours. Julian, it is Lawrence Foley from Apex. Have you seen what the Alliance just released? I wrote what the Alliance just released, I replied. These precision requirements, the calibration schedules, they are impossible for us to meet. They are not impossible, Lawrence. I implemented similar standards at Apex 3 years ago, but they were never formally adopted because of cost concerns. Silence stretched across the line before Lawrence spoke again, his voice trembling. Our certification renewal is due next month. We are nowhere near compliant with these new requirements. The Alliance offers implementation consulting for companies transitioning to the new standards, I said, reciting our official position. I can refer you to that department if you would like. Lawrence declined, and I later learned Apex had hired an external consultant at premium rates. 2 weeks later, my assistant notified me that Apex had requested an expedite pre-assessment review, a service we offered to companies concerned about their certification status. The review was assigned to one of our senior inspectors, maintaining my professional distance from my former employer. The inspector's report arrived on my desk with a large red flag notification. Apex's equipment failed to meet the new standards by significant margins. Their calibration procedures were outdated, their precision measurements inconsistent, and their quality control documentation inadequate. I forwarded the report to our certification committee with standard recommendations for improvement paths. No special treatment, positive or negative, just the facts. 3 days later, Gerald Bennett called my direct line. Julian, he began without greeting. We need to discuss these new certification requirements. All communication regarding certification should go through official channels, I replied. The implementation team can assist with your transition plan. This is not about implementation, he snapped. These standards are clearly designed to target our processes specifically. This feels personal. The standards apply equally to all manufacturers in the sector, I said. Many companies are already in compliance. Others are successfully implementing updates. You know exactly what you are doing, he accused. You are using your position to punish us for not giving you that raise. I let his words hang in the air for a moment. Gerald, I am recording this call as per Alliance policy for all certification discussions. Would you like to rephrase your statement for the record? He hung up. Apex's formal certification review came due while I was presenting at an international standards conference in Vienna. The committee evaluated their application without my input, following our established protocols. Their findings were clear. Provisional certification only with mandatory compliance checks every 30 days until full standards were met. In industry terms, this was a significant blow. Provisional certification carried limitations on new contracts and required disclosures to existing clients about compliance status. For a company that had previously enjoyed automatic renewals, thanks largely to my behind-the-scenes corrections before official inspections, this represented both a practical and reputational crisis. Upon my return, I found 35 messages from various Apex executives, escalating in urgency and desperation. I responded with a single email directing all certification inquiries to our official channels, copying our ethics compliance officer to maintain transparency. The industry summit, 6 months later, highlighted how dramatically standards had shifted. My keynote presentation on precision requirements drew attendees from 4 continents. In the front row sat Apex's leadership team, including Gerald Bennett and Eleanor Sinclair, taking notes with intense focus. During the reception, Bradley Owens from Apex approached me, champagne glass in hand. "Impressive presentation," he said. "We have hired 3 specialists to implement the new standards, but progress is challenging." "Quality improvement is always a journey," I replied. "We have invested nearly $9,500,000 in equipment upgrades," he continued. "Ironically, these are the same upgrades you requested in your last budget proposal." I sipped my water, saying nothing. "The thing is," Bradley lowered his voice, "we are still struggling. The documentation you left was not quite complete." "The documentation was comprehensive for the methods in use then," I corrected. "The new standards require different approaches, which you pioneered," he noted. "Gerald wants to meet with you privately to discuss consulting opportunities." I smiled. "Alliance staff are prohibited from private consulting with entities we certify. That would represent a conflict of interest." "He is prepared to make it worth your while," Bradley pressed. "That would be illegal," I stated. As I turned to leave, he grabbed my arm. "Without certification, we lose the Westlake contract. That is 40% of our annual revenue." I removed his hand. "Then focus your energy on meeting the standards rather than circumventing them." As I walked away, Eleanor Sinclair intercepted me. "Julian," she began with artificial warmth, "you look wonderful. This new position clearly agrees with you." "Thank you," I replied. "We have been doing some restructuring at Apex, creating a new division focused on precision technology advancement. The board has approved an exceptional compensation package for the right leader." I met her gaze directly. "Are you offering me a job, Eleanor?" "We are exploring possibilities with someone who understands our unique challenges," she countered. I smiled. "I believe the Alliance's guidelines already provide realistic timelines for companies committed to quality improvement." "Companies that can survive those timelines," she muttered. The statement hung between us, revealing that Apex was in serious trouble. "If Apex Dynamics cannot meet industry standards," I said, "perhaps there are more fundamental business challenges to address." Her pleasant facade cracked. "You know exactly what you are doing to us." "Applying the same stance to all manufacturers that I apply to myself," I suggested. "Yes, I do know exactly what I am doing." As I walked away, Gerald Bennett appeared from a side hallway, moving to intercept me. His usual confident stride had diminished to something almost tentative. His face showed the strain of months fighting against the inevitable. "2 minutes," he said, stepping into my path. "That is all I ask." Against my better judgment, I paused. "We made a terrible mistake," he admitted, lowering his voice. "Would you consider consulting for us? Name your price." I studied the man who had laughed at my request for fair compensation after years of dedication, who had taken credit for my innovations while denying me advancement. "I am afraid I am quite grateful for my current position," I replied, echoing his dismissive words from our last performance review. As I stepped around him, he called after me, "This is not over, Julian." I turned back briefly. "You are right about that, Gerald. For Apex Dynamics, this is just beginning." What I could not tell him was that the true reckoning was still coming. My actual plan was only now entering its final phase. The panel discussion on ethics was my last official event. As experts debated, I noticed Gerald slipping out, phone pressed to his ear, face tense. 2 weeks later, news reported that Apex Dynamics had secured an emergency loan. Reading between the lines, they were burning cash to meet certification. Back at Alliance headquarters, my team had begun the second phase of our standards modernization, transparent attribution protocols. This new framework would require companies to properly credit technical innovations to their original developers, both to recognize individual contributions and to create clear chains of intellectual ownership. The patent system already does this, argued one board member during our review. Patents are expensive and often impractical for process innovations, I explained. Many breakthrough methods are developed by employees who lack resources to patent their work, while companies claim these innovations without acknowledging the creators. The board approved the initiative. It would be implemented as a voluntary certification enhancement for the first year, becoming mandatory in the second. That evening, I received an unexpected visitor at my office. Lawrence Foley stood in my doorway. "Lawrence, what are you doing here?" "I interviewed with your team this morning," he said. "They offered me a position starting next month. Congratulations, but why would you leave Apex?" Lawrence's expression darkened. "Things have changed. They brought in consultants who blame everyone but leadership. 3 senior engineers were let go last week." "That is not surprising," I said, "but disappointing." "There is more," Lawrence continued, leaning forward. "They have been going through your old files, claiming you deliberately sabotaged documentation. Gerald told the board you orchestrated the new standards specifically to damage Apex." I smiled. "Desperation makes people inconsistent." He shrugged. "I thought you should know they are developing a formal complaint against you, alleging conflict of interest in the standards development." My smile widened. "Are they really?" Lawrence studied my expression. "You do not seem concerned, because I have done nothing wrong," I replied. The next morning, I received formal notice that Apex Dynamics had filed a complaint with the Alliance's Ethics Committee and the Industry Oversight Board. They alleged that I had weaponized inside knowledge and manipulated certification requirements to target specific operational methods. They also claimed I had deliberately deleted calibration protocols before leaving. I forwarded the complaint to our legal team with a brief note, advising them to implement our standard response protocol, which involved a comprehensive review of all documentation. For the next 8 weeks, I continued my regular duties while the ethics investigation proceeded. I made no public comments, maintained strict professional boundaries, and focused on our new attribution framework. 3 manufacturing leaders approached me about early adoption of the attribution standards, eager to position themselves as ethical innovators. I worked closely with their teams, establishing processes that would later become industry models. 6 weeks after filing their complaint, Apex requested an urgent meeting with the Alliance Board. As Chief Innovation Officer, I was invited but recused myself. Instead, I prepared a detailed brief for the board and watched the proceedings via closed-circuit television from my office. Gerald Bennett led Apex's presentation, flanked by their legal team and 2 external consultants. Today, he projected confident indignation. "The new standards are technically sound," he conceded, "but their implementation timeline is punitive and appears targeted at specific manufacturers, including Apex. We believe this represents a conflict of interest related to Julian's previous employment." The board chair responded with practiced neutrality. "The Ethics Committee has completed its investigation. Their findings have been distributed." Gerald accepted the thick folder handed to him, but continued without opening it. "In addition, we have discovered evidence that Julian deliberately withheld critical calibration documentation before his departure. This is a serious accusation." The board chair glanced at the Ethics Committee representative, who stood. "Actually, that specific allegation was investigated thoroughly." Page 47 of our report addresses documentation protocols at Apex. Julian maintained exceptional standards. His departure materials included 3,120 pages of technical documentation, 170 training videos, and detailed transition notes. We have compared this to industry benchmarks and found it exceeds standard practices by approximately 420%. Critical calibration sequences were missing, Gerald argued. "If I may," interjected Roland Mercer, "we found the calibration sequences fully documented in Section 12.3 with cross-references to implementation guides in the appendices." Gerald conferred hurriedly with his team, his face flushing as a consultant showed him a tablet. It appears, Gerald said finally, that some documentation may have been misfiled internally. The meeting deteriorated from there. Apex's allegations collapsed under scrutiny, but the true reckoning was far more serious than a failed corporate complaint. During the 8 weeks of the investigation, our legal team, operating under my guidance, had uncovered a critical piece of evidence. In their haste to claim sole ownership of my 24 innovations for public investor reports and federal regulatory compliance, Gerald and Eleanor Sinclair had committed a severe legal violation. They had forged my signature on an intellectual property assignment agreement, backdating it by 4 years. My personal archive, containing the original, dated research logs and code repositories, proved the forgery. Under Oregon Revised Statute, Section 165.013, and Federal Statute 18 U.S.C. Section 1001, this forgery and the subsequent submission of false records to federal regulatory bodies constituted a major crime. Additionally, by claiming ownership of these innovations in public financial filings to inflate their company valuation, they had violated the Securities Exchange Act, specifically Securities and Exchange Commission Rule 10b-5, codified at 17 CFR. Section 240.10b-5 for material misrepresentation to investors. My attorney submitted the evidence of forgery and securities fraud to the Securities and Exchange Commission and federal regulators. Within days, the Industry Oversight Board initiated a separate investigation. Apex's board of directors, facing severe criminal and financial exposure, immediately launched an internal inquiry. Gerald, Eleanor, and 3 other executives were placed on administrative leave. Apex's stock price plummeted by 45%, and the Westlake contract was terminated, wiping out 40% of their annual revenue. 3 weeks later, Eleanor Sinclair stood awkwardly at my office doorway, looking diminished. "The board asked me to come," she said. "We are facing collapse. The board wants to negotiate. They are prepared to offer public acknowledgement of your contributions, back pay for the raises you should have received, and naming rights for the calibration method." "Why would I want any of that now?" I asked. "Because without it, Apex will not survive another quarter," she admitted. 400 people will lose their jobs. I considered her words. The attribution framework offers a path forward for companies willing to honestly document their innovation history. Apex could be among the first to adopt it. That would mean admitting publicly that leadership took credit for work we did not do, she said. Yes, I replied. It would mean telling the truth. The following month, Apex became the 4th company to adopt the attribution framework. Their implementation included a public reconciliation of innovation credits, acknowledging 35 engineers whose contributions had previously been stolen. My name led the list with 24 distinct innovations spanning 9 years. Gerald and Eleanor resigned. The new chief executive officer, promoted from engineering, introduced a transparent compensation structure. Lawrence Foley returned to Apex to lead their compliance team. At the next summit, I presented the final version of the attribution framework, now adopted by over 60% of certified manufacturers. The revenge was not in leaving Apex. It was not even in exposing their practices. The true revenge was in creating a world where what happened to me could not happen to anyone else.